It was the moment no one saw coming. After years of chaos, silence, and emotional distance, it wasn't Christine, it wasn't Janelle, and it wasn't even Meri. It was Robyn. The one wife who was supposed to be the favorite. The one wife Kody clung to while the rest drifted away. But there he was, Kody Brown, sliding divorce papers across the table. To Robyn. And with that single gesture, everything we thought we understood about this family shattered. Hey friends, I'm Olivia, and this is TLC's Sister Wives Secrets. If you've been following this family as long as I have, then you know this isn't just about one man and four wives. This is about identity, faith, control, and heartbreak. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me your thoughts in the comments, because I want to know how you felt when you saw this moment. Was it karma? Was it grief? Or was it just the final crack in a dream that was never real to begin with? The Brown family started with a promise, one man leading a spiritually united household, each wife loved equally, raising a mountain of kids in what they claimed was a divine structure. Plural marriage was supposed to be their truth, their legacy. But now, that legacy is broken, splintered across 3 states, 3 ex-wives, and dozens of children trying to make sense of the chaos they grew up in. And Robyn? The woman who was once painted as the last true believer is now sitting across the table from Kody, stunned, devastated, and probably realizing, just like the rest of them, that this isn't a family anymore. It's a pile of ash from a fire that burned too hot for too long. What we're going to look at together is how we got here, how Kody Brown's dream of plural marriage collapsed not in one blow, but in a series of emotional betrayals, impossible expectations, and deep, unresolved wounds. We'll look at Christine's escape, Janelle's quiet power, Meri's isolation, and Robyn's fall from grace. And yes, we have to talk about the most heartbreaking moment of all, the death of Garrison Brown, because that loss didn't just break hearts. It ripped open everything this family was pretending to hold together. So buckle in, because what was once a symbol of spiritual commitment has now exploded into grief, bitterness, and lost faith. And we are going to walk through every raw and honest step. It's almost hard to believe now, but there was a time when the Browns were held up as a modern symbol of unity through faith. One man, 4 wives, all bonded not by legality, but by what they called a higher purpose. Kody Brown believed with his whole heart, at least back then, that he was called to live plural marriage, that by building a large blended family, he was fulfilling a spiritual mission. And for a while, it really looked like that vision might work. Christine was the third to join, but in many ways, she was the one who brought warmth and tradition. She was raised in polygamy, knew what it required, and came in believing in the system. Janelle came in with a more independent streak, more practical, more reserved, but just as committed. Meri was the first, and for years believed she held a unique place in Kody's heart. And then, years later, Robyn came along. Young, soft-spoken, full of emotional language that Kody seemed drawn to like a magnet. Together, they were supposed to be a team, sister wives raising their kids in a cooperative, faith-centered home. But if you were watching closely, even in those early seasons, the cracks were already forming. Kody always claimed he loved each wife equally, but viewers weren't buying it. His energy was different around Robyn from the start. The way he lit up when she entered the room. The emotional intimacy they shared so quickly. It was more than a new relationship glow. It was preference. And for the other wives, it was a slow, creeping betrayal. Christine was the first to show it. Her smiles faded behind closed doors. The woman who used to talk about the joy of polygamy began to withdraw, to question, to hurt. She once said, "I just want to be a safe place for my kids." And that was telling. It wasn't about Kody anymore. It was about survival. Janelle, meanwhile, always seemed to choose peace over conflict, but that doesn't mean she didn't notice. She knew the emotional investment wasn't the same across households. She made it work, not out of joy, but out of grit and duty. And Meri. We all watched her heartbreak unfold in real time, from the catfishing scandal to years of being sidelined, emotionally blocked out. From the outside, it might have looked like a functioning family. But inside, those emotional cracks were growing. And by the time Robyn joined, that foundation of faith was already beginning to buckle under the weight of reality. Fast forward to the point where the shifting balance within the Brown family is impossible to ignore. As time passed, Kody's emotional investment in his plural marriage took a sharp turn, and it wasn't just his growing attachment to Robyn that was the problem, though that was certainly a big part of it. What made this whole thing even more painful was the way the other wives were treated. The emotional neglect of Christine, Janelle, and Meri slowly escalated, but none of them could find a way to break free from a system that was built on religious obligation, family duty, and the fear of leaving behind a world they knew. The pivotal moment for Christine came when she realized that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be number one in Kody's heart, and that realization crushed her. She had hoped for so long that things might shift, that Kody might come around and the love they once shared could be rebuilt. But instead, what she saw was Kody's increasingly intense focus on Robyn. It was hard not to see it. The couple's bond became so obvious that it practically screamed from every episode. Kody's attention was pulled in one direction, and the rest of his wives, particularly Christine, were left to pick up the emotional pieces. For Janelle, this wasn't a surprise, but it didn't make it any easier. She'd been quietly bearing the brunt of Kody's favoritism toward Robyn. Yet she still stayed. Why? It's complicated, right? There's this unspoken contract that comes with polygamy. There's a fear of what happens if you walk away. Fear of failure, of being cast aside by the family. Janelle may have been distant and pragmatic, but even she wasn't immune to the emotional toll of being seen as second best. And then there's Meri, whose relationship with Kody had always been fraught with tension. It's heartbreaking to watch her continue to hold on, to try time and time again, despite being emotionally shut out by Kody. The infamous catfishing scandal in 2015 had shaken her to her core, and instead of healing from it, she became more isolated. She couldn't even get Kody's attention, let alone any emotional support. To make matters worse, the deeper Kody's attachment to Robyn became, the more Meri was forced to confront just how little of her marriage was left. With each passing season, the struggle became clearer. The dream of a harmonious, unified family was crumbling. The emotional neglect, the favoritism, the quiet but constant erosion of relationships, all of it set the stage for the explosive events that would follow. It wasn't just a matter of Kody picking one wife over the others. It was the deep, painful unraveling of an entire family's foundation. The fracture lines were already there. And no matter how hard they tried, there was no going back to the way things were. The wounds were too deep, the divide too wide. In that chaos, it was only a matter of time before something had to give. And, as we now know, that breaking point would be marked by some truly devastating moments. By now, the fallout from years of emotional neglect, unaddressed issues, and Kody's deepening favoritism toward Robyn was no longer something the family could hide. The cracks had turned into gaping holes, and the consequences of those deep wounds were beginning to show, not just between Kody and his wives, but also in their relationships with their children. As much as Kody clung to the idea of keeping his plural marriage intact, the truth was that the foundation had already crumbled, and no amount of faith or denial was going to hold it together for much longer. Christine, who had long been struggling with her place in Kody's life, finally made a gut-wrenching decision that shook the entire family. Her choice to leave Kody was not just a result of her emotional exhaustion. It was also the recognition that Kody's heart was never truly hers to begin with. The pain in her eyes when she confronted him about the lack of intimacy, connection, and respect in their marriage was palpable. She had tried to make it work. She had sacrificed so much of herself for the family, but what broke her was Kody's inability to see her, really see her, as an equal partner. The emotional neglect, the constant rejection, and the brutal reality that Robyn was now the one who held his heart made it impossible for Christine to keep pretending. When she left, it wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the collapse of an entire family structure, the unraveling of a dream that Kody had once fervently believed in. What was once built on the premise of shared love, faith, and unity was now a shattered mess of broken hearts and betrayal. Janelle's decision to step away from Kody came soon after. Like Christine, she had long since been living in the shadow of Robyn's dominance. But what's so heartbreaking about Janelle's departure is that she never really had the chance to mourn her marriage, because she was too busy being the emotional caretaker of everyone else. It was her quiet strength that had kept the family together for so long. But now, even she had to admit that the emotional toll of staying in this toxic environment wasn't worth the sacrifice anymore. The sadness in her face when she left was undeniable. She was choosing to preserve her dignity, her peace of mind, and her autonomy, even if it meant walking away from the man she had once pledged to share her life with. Meri, too, had been through her own personal hell. After the catfishing scandal, her emotional wounds had never fully healed. She had been reaching for something that simply wasn't there, trying desperately to feel wanted by Kody, trying to make him see her, even as he distanced himself more and more. Meri's final act of breaking away wasn't just a physical departure, it was a declaration of her own self-worth. She had spent years fighting to keep a relationship alive that was never really reciprocal, and it was time to finally let go. But perhaps the most tragic fallout of all was the devastating emotional toll it took on the Brown children, as they watched their parents, who had once seemed so united in their spiritual commitment to polygamy, fall apart. It became clear that the dream of a large, loving, plural family had been shattered for good. Their world, which had once been defined by their father's insistence on polygamy, was now a series of fractured relationships. None of the Brown children, it seemed, were interested in continuing the family legacy of plural marriage. The sense of abandonment, the emotional scars, and the wreckage left behind by their parents' choices would echo through the generations. The ultimate irony was that the very thing that had defined their lives, polygamy, was no longer something they would carry forward. In the aftermath of the separation, there was no singular villain. There was only pain, grief, and deep regret on all sides. Kody may have been the catalyst for much of the breakdown, but each person in this family had their own wounds to heal, their own journey to embark on. It wasn't just the collapse of a marriage, it was the collapse of a whole belief system, a family unit, and the dream of a life they had all once believed in. The tragic death of Garrison Brown marks the emotional climax of the story, the turning point where everything that had been building throughout the narrative comes crashing down. It is in this moment of profound grief that the fragile unity between Janelle and Kody is momentarily restored, though it is a fleeting and superficial connection. The loss of Garrison, a key member of their extended family, forces them to confront the depth of their emotional wounds, and they are briefly united by shared sorrow. Their grief brings them closer in the sense that they momentarily look past their individual struggles and responsibilities, finding common ground in their collective mourning. However, this temporary unity does little to mend the deeper fractures that have been festering between them for much longer. Kody's reaction to Garrison's death is one of intense guilt and regret. He becomes overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility for his actions, or inactions, and the consequences they've had on those around him. Kody is the leader of the family, but this moment of loss forces him to acknowledge the inadequacies in his leadership. His guilt is profound, not just for Garrison's death, but for the choices that led to the breakdown of their family's idealistic vision. This realization casts a shadow over his leadership, revealing a man deeply unsure of himself, unable to prevent the unraveling of the family he had once hoped to unite through spiritual and emotional connections. Kody's leadership, once marked by confidence and authority, now appears fragile and uncertain. The weight of his decisions crashes upon him, and he is left to wonder whether the collapse of the spiritual family he had dreamed of was inevitable all along. Garrison's death, while tragic in its own right, symbolizes the death of this dream. No amount of regret can bring back what was lost, and no amount of sorrow can undo the damage that has already been done. The spiritual family that Kody had envisioned is no longer a living, breathing entity. It has dissolved, irrevocably, in the wake of their personal failures and broken relationships. For Robyn, the grief runs even deeper. While she mourns the loss of Garrison, a person she clearly cared for, her sorrow is also tied to the dissolution of her own dream. The vision of a harmonious, united family, a family where every member was spiritually connected and bound by mutual respect and love, feels now like a tragic illusion. Robyn had long clung to the belief that they could create a supportive, idealistic family dynamic, but Garrison's death serves as the final nail in the coffin of this dream. Her grief is multifaceted. It is the pain of losing someone she loved, yes, but also the pain of realizing that the idealistic family she had worked so hard to build was nothing more than a fantasy. The dream is gone, and with it, so too is a sense of purpose and fulfillment she once had in her family's shared vision. In the aftermath of Garrison's death, the family finds itself irrevocably fractured. The loss is not just the death of a person, but the death of an idea, a dream that, for all its beauty, was doomed from the start. The emotional weight of this loss, coupled with the unresolved guilt and grief each character carries, leaves the family standing at the precipice, unable to move forward in any meaningful way. The temporary unity that Kody and Janelle briefly share evaporates as the full scope of their emotional burden sinks in, and they are left with the sobering realization that nothing can ever truly be the same again. In the aftermath of everything, the surviving members of the family begin to forge new paths, stepping into lives that reflect their personal growth and evolving identities. Christine, once bound by the weight of her polygamous marriage, experiences a powerful rebirth. She marries for love, not duty, and reclaims her sense of self. This new chapter symbolizes her empowerment, not just as a wife, but as a woman who had spent years suppressing her desires in the name of family and faith. Her marriage is a celebration of choice, autonomy, and the realization that she deserves more than what she had once accepted. Janelle, too, embraces independence. She channels her energy into business ventures, building a life that is no longer defined by the constraints of her marriage to Kody. For the first time, she stands on her own, creating a future rooted in her own efforts and aspirations. Janelle's decision to focus on her personal goals signifies a reclaiming of her life beyond the familial unit. It's a move toward self-sufficiency, something she had long been denied in a family dynamic that centered on Kody's leadership and decisions. Meri, perhaps the most inwardly conflicted, finally chooses herself. After years of being emotionally tethered to Kody and the weight of expectation, she steps away from the family structure and seeks peace within herself. Meri's journey is one of quiet defiance, where she refuses to sacrifice her own needs for the sake of others, acknowledging that her worth is not bound to her role in the family. The collapse of the family isn't just the end of a relationship. It's the collapse of a belief system that once promised fulfillment, unity, and spiritual growth. The dream of a harmonious polygamous family, once vibrant and full of hope, has shattered. The final reflection lingers. Was it ever real? Or just a fantasy too fragile to last? This question, haunting and unresolved, calls viewers to ponder whether the ideal was ever attainable or simply doomed from the start.